going slower is probably better than going too fast. I mean, in my business in the beginning, I was very focused on growth. I just wanted to push revenue. I was all about top line, top line, top line. And what happened was I was taking any buyer that was looking to buy from me. But at the time when I was saying what I was saying earlier was that the market was doing really well from 2014 to 2019. Like things were really moving, and it was very easy to sell. Everyone was asking, new buyers all the time. But at the time, I was getting I was getting so much attention, and it was easy to sell that I wasn't actually doing my due diligence well enough. I wasn't, spending the time to develop some of those relationships. I was too spread thin. So I think going slower is sometimes better than going too fast.
Welcome to the EO Business Podcast. I'm Linh Podetti, shining the spotlight on entrepreneurs and members of EO as they share their real, raw, and remarkable journeys. Today's guest is Alex Schultz, a founding board member of the EO Greater Bay Area Metro Hong Kong chapter. Originally from Philadelphia, US, Alex kicked off his career at Goldman Sachs in New York after graduating with a finance degree. But at just 24, with only $25,000 in savings, he left Wall Street behind to pursue his entrepreneurial dream in Asia. What started as a food tech app idea quickly pivoted into an unexpected but wildly successful venture as a lobster broker in Greater China. Fast forward 10 years and his company now distributes over £1 million of seafood annually, generating more than $11 million US in revenue. He's built a thriving distribution network across the region and is on a mission to become a global leader in sustainable seafood sourcing. In this episode, Alex opens up about the realities of running a business in Hong Kong, navigating tariffs, macroeconomic headwinds, and the mindset it takes to face big challenges head on. So let's dive in.
This episode is sponsored by
Great design is something that improves with age, like me. And this, a lifetime guarantee. That's important. And because Mia specialises in all of these things, of course I put my name on it. Introducing the new Mia Durham Palmer range. Mia, with you for life.
Hi, Alex. Welcome to the show. So great to see you again.
Hey, Lynn, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I had a fortunate chance to meet you in person in Hawaii recently, and I was amazed at your story of how you went from a financial industry to lobster importing. So we're going to talk all about that today. Alex, you want to talk a little bit about how you got started in this lobster industry, this yummy food that it's one of my favorite seafood?
Yeah, sure. It's a little bit of a stroke of luck in some ways, but I moved to Hong Kong back in 2014 with Goldman Sachs, and my childhood dream had always been to start my own business. And when I moved out here, I just felt this entrepreneurial vibe that the city brings. It just has so much energy. It has so much, there's so many people that are trying to make things happen. And at the time I moved out here, I eventually resigned from the bank, and I went out to start my own business. And at the time, I was trying to build a marketing efficiency sort of flash promotion app. But at the time, I realized I didn't necessarily want to sit in front of the computer all day, and I didn't want to be coding. And so eventually, I really was networking a lot, and I put my name out in a lot of places, and I was taking meetings left and right. And I eventually met somebody that was sort of working as a sales representative for a company in Canada who was importing lobsters to China. And I sat down with this lady, and she kind of told me about the fact that if you're a broker, you can make a lot more money than just being a sales rep. And at the time when I was struggling to get my app launched and to fundraise it and to code, it looked like an opportunity for me to earn some revenue and earn some money, because I had started depleting my savings. I was 24 years old. I wasn't actually sure if that was the path that was going to be for me. And so a little bit of I put my name on a yacht club website. This lady reached out to me, and we took a meeting from that. So it was a bit random, but you just kind of never know. And, I've been doing this business now for 10 years. I didn't have any connections or any background in the space. I didn't really know anyone in the lobster industry. I didn't know anyone in the seafood industry. Again, I went to school for finance. I was living in New York. I'm originally from Philadelphia. So we really don't have any sort of connections to the industry, but I've really enjoyed it. Growing up as a kid, we always used to do a lot of fishing trips, and we been to Alaska and the Atlantic Ocean, and so I mean the seafood industry has always been something I've enjoyed doing. And even so, when you eat seafood with people, you typically share it around a round table and whatnot. So it's a very communal sort of food. And so, yeah, I mean, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I've had the business grow for about 10 years now. I started in 2014. Our I incorporated in 2014, but it actually took me over a year to get the first shipment over to Hong Kong from Canada. And so since October of 2015, we essentially started with, I probably started with about 25,000 US dollars is what I started my business with. And as of last year, we hit revenues of 11 million US dollars. So, yeah, it's been a little bit of a journey. Certainly a lot of up and downs, a lot of lessons learned, but you just kind of just open-mindedness and just being flexible and, you know, taking an opportunity where you see there might be some potential and then kind of figuring out as you go along is kind of the way I've been doing it. So,
Yeah, that's amazing. You're young, ambitious, and you made it in a country that you have no idea about. So
mm.
when did you actually migrate to Hong Kong? Like, so you would have been doing the business by just traveling at the beginning and maybe working there, or did you go straight into migrating over?
Well, so to back up a little bit, in 2011, I got a summer analyst internship in Hong Kong, and that was my first exposure. So it was a summer 3-month program, and then I went back to the States to finish up my senior year of college. And then after that, I got a job with Goldman in New York, and I was working there for about a year and a half, and then I asked to be relocated back out to Hong Kong. So I originally came back out to Hong Kong with the bank,
Uh-huh.
and then soon after I came back out here, I was full time. I had a working visa. I was obviously legal to work here. So for once I resigned, it took me about 6 to 9 months to sort of figure out all the legalities around how do I stay here without an employer. I have to now switch to being a self-employed person. I had to go through the navigating, incorporating a business and then like figuring out how I'm going to stay here with a visa. And then what is the government going to require for me to stay here? And then the interesting part is how, what, what am I doing that the locals can't do? Right. So I had to kind of even prove to the government that, hey, I'm willing to stay here. So yeah, the whole time when I started the business, I was here.
Hmm.
I was here in Hong Kong. Um, but there were some times in the beginning where I obviously had to fly to the US or Canada to sort of meet with suppliers and sort of get some of those connections going. But a lot of it, yeah, most of my time was here because I always felt like you don't have a business unless you have customers. So I was really working on sort of developing the relationships with my customers first to see who would be buying and who wouldn't be buying because I obviously can't bring. I deal with like live products and fresh products, so I have a very time sensitive um, period to work with. So I need to make sure
Yeah.
my buyers were set up first, and then I could worry about my suppliers. So yeah, in the beginning, I was working here and living here. I got to a point where there was a visa problem where I was waiting for the government to renew my visa. I had to switch from an employment visa to an investment visa, which was essentially what I needed to be an entrepreneur in Hong Kong. Needed to show, a business plan. You need to show money in the bank. You need to, you need to have buyer contracts. So there was a lot of steps I had to perform before I could renew my visa to stay here legally. So, but
Yeah.
it was there was a period where I had to go back to the States for about 6 months.
Mhm.
And it was actually a good time because when I went back to the States for 6 months, it was an opportunity for me to work for my grandfather and sort of get some money to come back, to earn some money while I was waiting for the visa, as well as sort of try to develop the business a little bit from abroad. So there was a point in which I was away for about 6 months waiting for the visa to be renewed. Once it was renewed, then I came back. So and that was all around 2014.
Yeah. And so because you lived in Hong Kong for a while, did you already know the language or are you dealing with people that are speaking English? I guess I'm leading to, I guess, what are some of the challenges other than maybe the language barrier that you face working in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think for me, the major change was I was, obviously coming from the finance industry where you're working with certain types of people that are extremely competitive and they have, the pedigree of going to certain schools and they just have technical background and expertise. And then I was switching to a completely different industry, in the seafood industry where I've now had to talk to people in a very different language, right? And so a lot of the times I would speak to some of these people, I had to, uh, I'd have to phrase my words or I'd have to I would have to approach the relationships a little bit different than how I did in finance. And the way I the way I went about finding my clients in the beginning was literally walking in and doing door-to-door sales. I mean, there's sort of places in Asia and a lot of the cities in China and Hong Kong where there's like these big wet markets, right? And these big wet markets are typically all the buyers are in the same place. So
Mm.
when I walked into some of these markets, I stood out very easily because, they're all, maybe Chinese, and a lot of them didn't speak English. So what I had to do was I found one or two people that spoke a little bit of broken English, and I would get a conversation going with them. But eventually someone would be interested in the products I was trying to sell, and they would find someone on their end that spoke English, and then that we would kind of have a conversation with this intermediary for a little while, right? And then that was kind of how I started, where I was, you know, working, just trying to go in and meet people and just get their, I guess at the time it was maybe WhatsApp. Like, for instance, also in China, when I started to develop some contacts in China, I would, get the WeChat, and then we have the auto translate feature. So I could, eventually have it start that way. Um, but early on, I had my first employee, who eventually became my wife. She was somebody that really helped me kind of get in. She spoke Chinese, so she was able to help me foster some of the relationships in China, and she was able to get me really on the trajectory of adding some bigger clients once we could kind of cross that language barrier. But luckily in Hong Kong, everybody speaks English. Most of the people speak English, but in the seafood industry, most of the people do not speak English, at least to the decision makers and the bots, because traditionally speaking, a lot of the products that they handle are coming from Southeast Asia. And there's a lot of Chinese that speak in the areas that they're sourcing their products from. So they typically are working with people that are speaking Chinese already. But when you're dealing with somebody that's like maybe come from the US or Canada, those products, they're not dealing with Chinese over there. But as of, in the 2010s, I noticed there were more Chinese getting involved in the businesses, so it became easier for them to source from Chinese instead of like English speaking people. But anyway, um, it was challenging. Obviously, the buyers I approached in the beginning were typically just Chinese speaking, they weren't English speaking, and I always felt that my goal was to find buyers that were going to sell to the broader Chinese market instead of me selling directly to other foreigners. I just think the target market is too small, so I really had to make any effort to speak to the Chinese
Yeah.
speaking buyers. So, um, yeah, it was a trial and error phase. I mean, there was times where I was taken advantage of. They probably thought, hey, this guy doesn't speak Chinese. Let's try to pull a fast one. And it happened, but you learn, and you typically have to go with your gut sometimes with the people you meet with, and you kind of start small, and then you can build up the orders as they go along. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have to face much, I guess, supply chain type challenges, whether it's importing the ship, over the years that you've been there, has there been issues with increasing cost of shipping, or maybe the suppliers went out of business or anything like that that has affected your business over the years?
It's funny because I think macro environments sometimes dictate how quickly these things change. For instance, like in the 2010s, like, when I got first started, so I was 15, to call it 2019. I mean, it was boom time. It was very easy to get things moving. There were a lot of new players in the industry. There was, um, you know, it- goods were moving very quickly. There were new suppliers. There was new logistics options. China was shipping a lot to the U.S. and Canada at the time, so that meant that the freight costs coming from Canada and U.S. back to China were actually very cheap. And what happened was a lot of the Chinese companies were starting to have their own planes. It was like there were more routes. It was just like it was affordable to get the products over because there was just the economies were growing, so there were more and more people entering the space. Um, and so, you know, there was a little bit of a change in 2019 and 2020 when you had COVID. There were businesses that kind of went out. They had too much focus on Asia. They had too much focus on China. And then once COVID hit, they lost that sort of buyer, and then they kind of phased out. So, over the years, you also have the people that are retiring. A lot of the businesses that I work with, have the fathers or the grandfathers have been in charge of the business for so many years, and now they're retiring. And then the younger generations are like maybe wanting to take over, or maybe don't want to take over. And then you have a sale, and then the sale goes to a private equity firm or a different company that like might want to change the business. So I think over the 10 years I've been in the business, I've seen a lot of rotation, a lot of change, a lot of consolidation. And I think that has to do with macro environment. I mean, you had all these businesses that joined from 2014 and 2019, and then it became very competitive. And then once the overall global economies are slowing down, you saw sort of like who were the stronger players and who were the guys that were just kind of floating along. And the guys that were just hanging in there were the ones that were sort of um, they either had to sell or go out of
Yeah.
business. And, but I think what's interesting is, and I learned is so many people I meet here in Asia, in Hong Kong, they do the business going from Asia to the US, right? Or Asia, to Canada. And I do it the other way around. So
Yeah.
when I talk about like the supply chain, a lot of people just don't understand that it's actually very cheap to get goods into China. Uh,
Ah.
yeah, because it just seems like the demand is there's less going in that direction. So it makes some goods that you would assume very expensive cheaper just because some of the freight costs are lower. So uh,
Well, this leads me to the current challenges of this whole tariff situation. How has that affected your business?
well, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit better at this moment considering the news last night, but
I know.
it
What was the news
it's
last
been
night? Update me.
Well, the news last night is that, Trump and China had a little bit of an agreement that they were going to reduce the tariffs, right? So, the US imports going into China are going to be roughly 10% now. And then, it's going to be roughly 30% from China going to the US. So they've been reducing it. But I mean, there's been so much back and forth over the last few weeks where it's really, I'm kind of just being patient. I'm waiting a little bit to see like how everything kind of settles. But it feels like at this moment, things are a little bit more manageable. Like I think we can sort of plan weeks ahead, and so since March. So what? There's been a lot of what's happening, but I throughout the year there's different products that I source from different places. For instance, just because it's more of competitive pricing. So typically Canada right now is where I source a lot of my lobsters from. Just because that's where most of it's being caught. That's where the prices are the cheapest. That's where the best quality is. But in the fall of last year, Canada put 100% EV electric vehicle tax on Chinese imports of electric vehicles. So then a couple months ago, China then responded with a tariff on seafood imports from Canada, which was effectively another 25%. So I mean, it's just, and then you had all this, then you thought to yourself, well, you know what? Okay, so Canada and China are having a little bit of this trade war. Now the US is also having this trade war. But how can we sort of find out which country is better to import from? Because a lot of the seafood can come from this similar area. So the Northeast of the US, you can kind of source the same products you can from from Atlantic Canada. So typically what we do is if there's a tariff put on one of the countries, we can source from the other country. But at the moment, um, both countries have a tariff. And what this has done is essentially since March 20th, my business in China has like come to a near halt. The prices are just too low. They're too high. Uh, and it comes down to sort of who's going to take the additional tariff price. Is it the consumers that are going to spend more to buy lobsters or buy seafood? Or is it going to be the shippers and the suppliers in Canada and the US that are going to say, we're going to lower our prices just to try to ship more or try to sell more. And so what you're having is you're at this point in which the Canadian Americans can't go down any further, and the Chinese can't go up any further to buy the products. Because I think, even before the tariffs, the Chinese economy hasn't been doing that well. The businesses, the revenues there have been slow. I still have my buyers. They're buying, but they're buying less. I mean, a lot of them are down 50% to their volumes of what we were doing a couple years ago. And so, I think you just have to be objective about this, and you can't, in the early days when I was having my business, I got a little bit, um, I felt like I had to force sales. Like I was like, I have to keep things going because I feel like my business requires that. But what I learned in that time is that it's certainly not good to force anything. And it's typically you want to just have a little bit you want to take a step back, take a breather, be patient and look at it from a long-term view and say, hey, look, this is obviously a macro challenge that even my business can't overcome. Like we're not going to be able we don't have 25 to 45%, buffer in our margins to be able to take that hit to try to sell more. So you always also worry is like, oh, well, if I'm not selling to these buyers, are they going to go somewhere else? Is someone else going to sell to them? But when you have something like tariffs, everyone is pretty much slapped with the same sort of situation. So you don't necessarily have to worry so much. But when I was first starting out, I always felt like I was so worried that I'd lose the buyer because I wasn't selling because I wouldn't be willing to sell to them. And what I find is that there's some players right now in the market that are still selling goods, and I find that when I really dig into how are they selling right now, I must believe that they're selling at a loss just to maintain market share. So it's something I certainly don't want to do. I've learned that before. I tried to do that, but um, it's not a good practice, and it's something I don't think any business should really do. I mean, there's points in which you maybe think you should, but so that's why I think the tariffs right now it's making people decide, what should I do and should I force it but I think I'm just trying to be a little bit patient here and see like when the dust settles, how is everything gonna go?
Yeah. I really admire your resilience, where when going through all those challenges, you're still in the same industry. If anything, you're dancing with the changes. It feels like you kind of now expect and know that there's always kind of this ebb and flow. And how do you maintain this level headedness? Like, what are there any, I guess, personal practice that allows you to be, almost mastered yourself?
Look, I'm still trying to work on that. I mean, that's something that's not easy to fix overnight, but I mean, I typically find that you have to have a clear headspace, and the way you can do that is just to me, I exercise. I mean, I'll take a long run, or I'll just sort of, go to the gym, or try to take my mind off things. But in the reality is, 10 years having a business, I really haven't had a day off. Like I haven't really had a vacation where I can totally check out, where I can totally have my phone on the side and not worry about any of the problems. And typically in my business where, the time sensitivity of the goods that I'm dealing with, like the perishables, right? And the live products, it's like every time I have shipments on the move, I'm always worried about like, is it going to get to the destination and not going to, um, die and then us complain, right? Complain. So, and then it typically is a financial loss to me. So, um, I, I've always, I haven't, I try to work on my sleeping. Um, and exercising is good. I mean, but I think just sort of surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs has also been something that's really been beneficial to me. And I think,
Yeah.
the journey in the beginning is I was very much sort of doing this on my own. And then I eventually, had my wife be a part of the business. So I had a sounding board, someone that was kind of in the business who, was able to help me get through some of the problems I was having. Just someone to talk to it was also very helpful. So I think, keeping a healthy mindset with just exercising, um, and, sometimes when I would exercise, and I'd do a long run or something like that, I get tired and then it would just kind of make me want to go to sleep. And then I would, be refreshed after that. And then I could approach some problems again, when I wake up and I'm clear minded. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's taking care of your body is also the same as taking care of your business. Like if you take care of your body well, you take care of your head, then I think you can really do well in your business as well. And it's a long-term journey. So
Yeah, and have there been moments where you wanted to give up over the years and question yourself around, I guess, this industry that's so volatile?
yeah, oh, hundreds of times, hundreds of times. I mean, but it's I think with anything, it's when you're faced with a challenge, it's like, do you try to push through it or do you just try to kind of find a way to just maybe rethink something? And a lot of times is you face this challenge and you think to yourself it's insurmountable. Like you can't get over it, right? Um, but like when you take a deep breath, when you step back and you say something, like let me like think about this. Let me see if there's actually a way around it. Most of the time you can find a way through it. And there's usually a solution to these problems.
Yeah.
Um, what I do like about my industry, what I do like about my business is that it's in a industry that is not necessarily going away. It's not super like a fad type of business. So I feel long term speaking that if I can just sort of weather this storm, in the future it's going to come back. Uh,
Yeah.
the only concern I really have is if like we're dealing with sort of like we're dealing with like goods that are being coming from the ocean, for example, right? So it's like, well, the scarcity or the too much fishing and the sustainability of the industry that could be a long term sort of issue. Um, but generally speaking, I think it's sort of like, being an entrepreneur and having a business is risky, but at the same time, I'm comforted by the fact that my industry is a little bit on the safer side. It's like it's more of like what I tell a lot of people and a lot of people in the States talk about is like a boring business where it's something that's always going to be like,
Always
a
that
food.
needed. Was always eat lobster. It goes to the price. That's it. Looking back at your journey working with Chinese people, people in Hong Kong, I guess, what are some tips if someone is thinking about, working with or having a business in places like that?
Yeah, I think it's obviously very challenging. I think I think like if it depends on what industry you're in. I think I find that a lot of people I've met that work with brands or have their own type of brands, I think they do well, because it's sort of something that is protected in some way as far as like IP or trademarks, and it's kind of hard to copy something that's a unique brand. But if you're sort of dealing in sort of a commodity space, which is what I'm dealing with, you're going to find yourself competing with sort of like these giant companies that seem to have unlimited resources, right? So I think the creativity aspect of a business that is coming in with a brand and something different or not in the market, almost more of something that's more innovative, stands a better chance. Um, and I think, finding the right people to work with. I mean, I've gone through a lot of clients or buyers in China, um, and in Asia that, at first they seem great, and they seem like they're a trustworthy person. But I think over time, you never know, like when they come up with a challenge, when they have to deal with like a problem in their businesses, are they going to figure it out and they're going to try to protect you as well? Because at the end of the day, we always say, relationships are so key in business, and you really want to have your buyers kind of look out for you as well. And it's kind of a two-way street. And I've had some that typically you try to spend a lot of time fostering the relationships, but um, what you hope to have is that you want to have almost like a friendship where if they're going to go through the problem, then they're going to fix it for you and they're going to protect you. And I've dealt with a lot of people that don't do that and they run away. And then it can be discouraging. One, two, it can be very costly, and three, it can cause a lot of people to give up. So I think what's happening is, and I think it's a great thing, is that China and Asia, for example, and the world over the last 20 odd years has been more connected, right? So I think there's more of understanding between different cultures, and I think it's easier for us to relate to one another. So I think it can help us um, form better business relationships too. So I mean, I don't want to share too much advice, but I would say just from my experience, I've spent a lot of time trying to like always be in my buyer's sort of face. Like I always try to meet with them. I always try to spend time with them. I try to understand the business. I want them to understand me. I want them to understand my business. And I think it's spending the time, and I think that's what's helped by me being here in Hong Kong and me being on the ground, is that you spend that time with your buyers, you spend that time with your customers, and they're gonna feel really, um, they're gonna appreciate that as well. And they want the same way that you want them to protect you, they want you to protect them. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and going slower is probably better than going too fast. I mean, in my business in the beginning, I was very focused on growth. I just wanted to push revenue. I was all about top line, top line, top line. And what happened was I was taking any buyer that was looking to buy from me. But at the time when I was saying what I was saying earlier was that the market was doing really well from 2014 to 2019. Like things were really moving and it was very easy to sell. Everyone was asking, new buyers all the time. But at the time I was getting like I was getting so much attention and it was easy to sell that I wasn't actually doing my due diligence well enough. I was, spending the time to develop some of those relationships. I was too spread thin. So I think going slower is sometimes better than going too fast. And, I think you have to always think long term, short term thinking. But
yeah.
that's the problem when you have a new business. Like you got to think short term just to like stay in business, to pay the bills in the beginning, to keep the lights on. So it's a chicken and egg kind of situation. But
Yeah, I think we all go through that. We go through that kind of ambition to grow really fast, only to realize, oh, this is not fun. I think profitability and running, you realize life and business is a marathon, not a sprint. Like where are you heading to, really? So I only recently learnt that as well. Before we kind of slowly wrap up as well, I wanted to talk a little bit about EO. So we met in EO. You only joined not that long ago. I want to hear a little bit about how did you find it, and I guess what have you enjoyed about EO?
yeah, I'm very relatively new. I guess I've sort of been in the works since May of 2024. And I'm part of a new chapter here that we have in the Greater Bay Area, which is essentially the southern part of China, which includes Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. It's more of an international chapter, and we just launched in March of 2025. Um, and I think to like what I was saying earlier is I've been sort of doing this for 10 years. And I think the reason why I was interested in joining was because I sort of wanted to get my butt kicked a little bit. I wanted to sort of get some new entrepreneurial juices flowing because I've sort of been kind of in that phase of like things have gotten comfortable again. And I'm really ready to like talk to some people about how I can get out of that and sort of focusing on something else. So my thoughts right now are more about pivoting. It's more about looking at a new market. It's more about looking at new products and trying to sell um, expand my business in a different way. But there was an EO member who I met through a softball league I play here in Hong Kong on the weekends, and he was a member in EO Beijing. Uh, and then he moved down to Hong Kong during COVID. There was actually a few EO members that moved out of China during COVID to Hong Kong. And obviously there's another chapter in Hong Kong, EO Hong Kong, but there seemed like there were some people that wanted to start another chapter here, and they asked me, said, "Hey, I know that you're an entrepreneur. Would you like to join?" So it seemed interesting. I didn't know anything about EO before. I hadn't heard about it, but now I feel like EO is everywhere in my life. So it's a great community. I've been the learning chair since May of 2024 when we weren't a chapter, but we've spent a lot of time trying to find members, recruit, and sort of create and build this chapter. And I'm the president-elect for the next year, and I've been participating in some of the EO events in the region. We went to GLC in Hawaii. I went to the president's meeting in Nagoya. We've started our forums for the last few months. We've had a lot of learning events. I mean, the best part about it is that you've met so many entrepreneurs that are coming from totally different businesses in different industries. And there's almost like it's hard to find these people, but somehow they're now everywhere around me at EO. And I think like I can't avoid them now. So I just, I'm also believing that I've already felt the impact of being an EO, I think, because I've been able to talk about sort of my struggles, and I've just even listening to other people and what they have to say has already been sort of something I can take away and I can implement in my business, and not only in business, but it seems like personally I'm developing as well. And so I think it's been a great experience so far. The level of commitment has been great from everyone in our chapter. And I think we're really excited. We have a lot of momentum because we just launched. And we have high growth targets, at least for recruiting new members in the region. Um, and as the economy gets a little bit better here, and as I think we start to grow, it's gonna be a really great chapter. So
Yeah. And I really appreciate that story because I mean, we started off talking about your business and how challenging it is and all these macro dynamics. And yet you found time to, when you join EO, you're doing all these different roles and you're contributing because often people don't join EO thinking they're too busy. Like, I don't know how the hell I will fit that in. But you've obviously found, um, benefits out of being involved. And, how did you create time to be an EO and the amount of work that you do?
well, I think it's good to sometimes be busy because I like to be busy and I like to be involved, but what that does for me is it helps me not overthink some things that are things. So I've enjoyed the fact that I've increased sort of my level of responsibility and commitment to EO, as well as being able to maybe not overthink some of these business decisions I probably don't need to overthink. So I think there's always ways to find time. I mean, I'll be honest, we don't have any kids, so I certainly have some time, and I've had now a business for 10 years. I hope I've kind of figured out how to be a little bit more efficient with my time. So I've had time to spend, I've been able to commit more effort to EO, just because I think I'm more efficient as a business person. Um, but I think if there's a will, there's a way, and we want to better ourselves. And I found like this was something that would make me a better person and a better business person. So it was worth me to just prioritize putting time into EO. So,
Yeah.
um, you
Yeah, I feel with you. I'm exactly like you. Now I'm so involved, and at first I was just worried about going to a forum. Like that was
yeah.
a lot of my time, but now you're heavily involved in the work. I was just gonna say, originally you joined the lobster business, or I'm sure any earlier stage of business, it's all about, I guess, financial success. Have that goal changed? Have that realization, what is business, what does success mean to you, changed over the years?
Yeah, I think when I first started my business in 2014, obviously I didn't know anything about the lobsters, and that wasn't even an opportunity for me. It was more about trying to build this app. Um, and my goal has always been, and I think as a child, I've always been sort of so committed to having my own business, and I've always wanted to have my own business my whole life. So my goal necessarily, I mean, financially, it'd be great to make a lot of money, but I really want to have a long term, um, sustainable business where it's just kind of providing a nice cash flow. It's providing a nice lifestyle, and it's going to be around, to stand the test of time. And so I think that's why it's so important to me to diversify, to look at new markets, to look at new products, look at new business units. Um, and so I'm doing the lobster business today, but it's great because like what I was saying earlier is F&B is sort of something that's never going to go away. And I like this kind of business because it's stable and it kind of fits in with my long-term plan of having a business that's going to be around for 50 to 70 years. Like I don't necessarily have the idea of trying to flip these businesses so much. Like I don't look to get into something that's super like a fad type of business where I'm here today and then in 2 years, like I better sell because it's going to be going away. So for me, it's like, and it's sort of the same way I think I train and same way I like exercise is like I'm more of a marathon runner. I'm less of a sprinter because I'm actually a very slow runner anyway. So I could never be a sprinter, but uh the point is I just like the long-term aspect of like the time I'm putting in to grow this business. I know that like I can go at my pace. I can be patient because the long-term goal is just having a business be around for many years. So and that's why like, you have macro and micro environments, micro business environments and the world changes. It's like it's really hard to time sort of how the global economies are going to flow as well. So I think if I can avoid that unnecessary, uh, you know, competition with how the world's gonna work. It's I feel better about sort of having a long-term mindset of like, it's gonna go up and down and I'm okay. As long as we sort of maintain the similar mindset and how we grow our business, I think we'll be around for a long time. So
Yeah. I love
that's
that.
that's my
Yeah. That's a really great attitude. It just feels like you're more calm, at peace, and embracing the journey, which is really, really important. Well, this leads me to the last question. With everything that you try to do, whether it's EO, whether it's running your business and building a legacy, like what do you actually want to, the world to remember you for? What is that lasting impact that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I think you know, I guess like I really appreciate sustainability. I appreciate, the world just being trying to help each other out and we protect the environment and we protect the earth. It's like our place that we've kind of been able to enjoy. It's an amazing place, and so I kind of want to be involved in types of businesses, and I want to be involved as a person as a like I want to be like have them just kind of leave the world in a better place than we had it before. So um I think that's kind of, I guess, sort of the way I live my life is I care about, my health. I care about my body. I care about, helping people. I care about, providing to my family and my friends and just trying to be supportive. And so I think just an overall, someone that's going to help move the world forward instead of like try to, just take whatever the resources are available to the world and see how we can to make, maybe the world just a better place.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I can do that, but certainly just uh yeah. So just try my best to do that.
Yes, you've shown that. I met you only for a brief time, but I remember you taking care of my dinner. I didn't have to pay for it. You're a generous soul, so thank you. Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's such a privilege meeting you, and I'm so grateful for EO connecting us. I'm from Sydney, you're from Hong Kong, and that's the beauty of it. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'll make sure to put all your details in the description, and if we need lobsters, we know who to call.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate it. It was also great meeting you, and I'm glad for EO to have been able to connect us as well as many all the other entrepreneurs I've met so far. So, um, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.